in the United States, South Korea, and Japan. And now it has greater capacity to do so.
That's U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, again, showing just how seriously the administration takes North Korea's missile launch test. Andrea Mitchell remains with us, and joining the conversation, Victor Cha, former Director for Asian Affairs at the National Security Council in the George W. Bush administration, who just penned an op-ed in the Washington Post headlined "The Right Way to Play the China Card on North Korea." And Bruce Klingner, former CIA Deputy Division Chief for North Korea, now a North Korea expert at the Heritage Foundation's Asian Studies Center. Thank you all for being with us. Andrea, you've got new reporting tonight about the missile launch taking U.S. intelligence agencies by surprise, and about that warning from former President or outgoing President Obama to incoming President Trump about just this.
Well, in fact, this was a two-stage intercontinental missile, ballistic missile, and immediately afterwards we were told by U.S. officials, Pentagon, and intelligence officials that it was a medium-range ballistic missile. They did not realize immediately that this was the first ICBM, a two-stage missile, which was capable, if the trajectory were flattened out, of reaching the mainland, of reaching Alaska at least. It went more than 1,700 miles out into space. That is farther, way farther than our orbiting space station. And it was really unexpected. They expected a missile test, but they did not expect one that included an ICBM. That was not foreseen. And it was on a mobile launcher. So it would, if you were considering a preemptive strike, and there's a lot of talk that we should take military action to take down a missile if we thought that a missile were on a launch pad and had a nuclear weapon, that we should take preemptive action. But in this case, a satellite is unlikely to spot this missile, which was liquid-fueled but mobile, and very difficult to spot in the short amount of time that it was ready to launch. So there were only a couple of hours. They didn't see it quickly enough, and they were taken by surprise. The other piece of what we're reporting is it's been known that the president, former President Obama, did on November 10th, at his first and only meeting in the Oval Office with Donald Trump, the president-elect, warn him that he should not be so worried about Obamacare, but that the biggest threat that he would face would come from North Korea. What we've learned in the last 24 hours from multiple sources is that he also warned him of the impending development of an ICBM, and that that was the real threat. So he should have been braced for this. There should have been more study of it. My conclusion, and other critics, outside critics, is that the process, because of the slow ramp-up of the filling of positions, of the deputies' positions and acting secretaries, they just have not, at all of the agencies, defense and state in particular, gotten up to speed, and they're not really functioning to game plan all of this.
Bruce, it's a pretty frightening picture that Andrea paints, but I wonder if I could get you to weigh in. All of the talk now, privately and publicly, is on how to motivate the North Korean leader to give up his nuclear arsenal if the last two men to do so ended up dead, Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi in Libya. How do you motivate someone to give up their arsenal if the two examples of people who did so ended up dead?
Well, in my meetings with North Korean officials last month in Europe, they made very clear that denuclearization was totally off the table. There's nothing the U.S. or South Korea could offer to induce them to abandon their nuclear arsenal. And that's consistent with other meetings that Victor Cha and others have had with North Korean officials. So what we need to do is stop pulling our punches on some of the pressure tactics. There's a misperception that North Korea is the most heavily sanctioned, the most cut-off nation on earth, as President Obama claimed, and that's really flat out wrong. The U.S. has done things to Iran that we haven't done to North Korea. And for example, the U.S. unilaterally has sanctioned last year only the first time we sanctioned as many North Korean entities as those we had sanctioned of Zimbabwe.
Why is that? Is that because China runs interference for them? Why is that the case?
Well, I think there was just a reluctance, particularly by the Obama administration, from pressuring North Korea. They were doing what I would call timid incrementalism, is they'd have a few entities that were sanctioned after each provocation. And if you talk to people in the government who work sanctions, they'll say, yeah, I have a list of Chinese and North Korean entities which are violating U.S. law, and we dole out a few entities after each provocation, and we save the rest for the next provocation. So the Obama administration, and I I think the Trump administration so far has continued to pull their punches.
Victor, do you see it that way, as two presidents with very different worldviews pulling their punches when it comes to North Korea?
I mean, in a sense, I do, Nicole. You know, I think that, you know, every U.S. president for the past 3 decades has taken a crack at this problem using negotiations, using sticks. And the problem has not been U.S. policy. The problem has been, as Bruce noted, that this is a country that is hell-bent on keeping their nuclear weapons and developing a capacity to reach the United States, to threaten the homeland of the United States. Andrea and I traveled to North Korea during the Bush administration several years ago, and we also had interaction with North Korean officials. The one thing that I would say about the Trump administration, though, is, you know, I do feel that, you know, when President Obama spoke to President Trump about this on November 10th, I think President Trump got very tuned in on this issue and has learned a lot. I mean, he's become quite expert on the issue. And has followed.
Do we have time, Victor, for someone who's learning on the job? I mean, North Korea seems to be all fired up and ready to go. I mean, are you reassured that the president is studying up? I mean, are you comforted?
I'm not reassured by North Korean behavior for sure. But when I look at what they've done, you know, which is to first send Tillerson, Mattis, and Pence to the region to shore up alliances, then to decide that if 85% of North Korea's trade is with China, we have to first try with China to put pressure on the regime.
Well, how's that going? I mean, how's that going? I saw the president tweeted that trade between China and North Korea is up 40%. I mean, is he acknowledging his own failures?
Right, and when that doesn't work, then you directly sanction China, which they started to do last week with the Treasury Department sanction of Bank of Dandong. So, you know, I think this is a strategy that almost any administration would follow, coming into the office, being faced with the challenges of a North Korean regime, you know, on the threshold of ICBM technology that could be operational. So, you know, in the end, my point is that the problem is North Korea. The problem is not that U.S. policy has been good in one administration or bad in the other. In every single case, the North Koreans have been the ones who don't want to make an agreement, or they want to make agreements that they can cheat on, and that's why we're in the situation we're now in.
All right, scary stuff. We'll have you guys back. We'll stay on it. Thank you, Andrea, Victor, and Bruce. Up next, just what does Vladimir Putin hope to get from Donald Trump this week? I'll ask a former KGB agent